We'll wait a few minutes for people that are outside getting in, but I know folks at home are joining us, so we'll let everybody get seated and get them a cold drink. And we'll get started in just a minute here. And hopefully you guys, for you in the audience, hopefully you got a ticket. We're going to have a drawing tonight. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So if you didn't, you can go out and get a ticket from Arliss, or afterwards we'll give people a few minutes to get a ticket. Unfortunately, you folks at home will not be eligible for the drawing tonight, but anyone that's going to be here will have a couple drawings. We actually had a couple other prizes come in. We've got a couple Bluebird boxes that came in, so we'll draw for those after we have the other drawing. So anyway, see if anyone else is coming in. I might go ahead and get started with the announcements, since it's kind of some of the general stuff that we go over every week or every month, and then a couple other things. So good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Broman. I'm the Executive Director of Wachiska Audubon. Welcome to our August meeting. I want to welcome everybody here in person and those of you at home that are joining us via the web. Wachiska is an independent chapter of the National Audubon with a geographic area spanning 17 counties in southeast Nebraska, and you can follow us on our website or our Facebook page. Tonight we're going to have a special drawing after the program. You must be present to win, and if you didn't sign in or get a ticket, you can do so right afterwards, and we'll get you a ticket that we'll draw. Dave Titterington, tonight's speaker, generously donated an $80 gift certificate from the Wild Bird Habitat to a lucky attendee, and then Lyle Veneer gave me a couple Bluebird boxes that he built that we'll give away after that. So we got a couple things tonight. So we got bonuses. I've got an announcement from Dave Wadeen, who manages the 9 Mile Prairie for the University of Nebraska. So I'm just going to read it. He called me today and asked if I could make this announcement tonight. So it starts out, Great Plains and Prairies. Join us at UNL's 9 Mile Prairie on Saturday, August 26th and Sunday, August 27th from 11 to 5 to watch the 2023 Lincoln Air Show. Bring lawn chairs and enjoy the prairie's dramatic vistas of the airport and downtown Lincoln. We're 2 miles from the airport runway and away from the big crowds at the air show, but don't worry, the Blue Angels and other military aircraft will definitely be loud enough to impress you. You can also enjoy naturalist-led hikes on the 5 miles of trails at 1, 2, 3 o'clock each day and help us collect prairie seed. To finish your day of military air power in tallgrass prairies, you can learn about the historic Strategic Air Command nuclear bomb bunkers on the Lincoln Airport Authority's land just north of 9 Mile Prairie. And for more information, he says you can go to lincolnairshow.com. I also left one of these sheets out at the front table, so you can look at that again or jot down that email address. It says they'll have portable outhouses, but bring lots of drinking water and snacks. So that's, again, Saturday and Sunday, August 26th and 27th at 9 Mile Prairie. So if you were thinking about going to the air show and didn't like the thought of getting in those long lines to get in and then paying for parking, here's an alternative. Free parking out there at 9 Mile Prairie. He said the gates will be open to the bunkers so people can park in the small parking lot and then along the road going up to the bunkers. So that's the 26th and 27th. I'm going to have Teresa Peller, our president, come up now, and I think she's got a couple announcements. We'll let Teresa let you know about the upcoming board meeting and anything else, and then I'll continue with a few more announcements. So, Teresa?
Okay, thank you, Mark. Good evening, everyone. A beautiful, beautiful, beautiful day out. Okay, yeah, just the general, our board meeting is scheduled for next Tuesday, August 15th, our Zoom meeting at 7 p.m. If you're interested in sitting in on that, you can let Arliss or Mark know, and they'll get you the Zoom link for that. And the second announcement is we're now starting the process in our organizational year where we start looking at the 2024 board members, and we're forming the nominating committee, which will be about 3 or 4 people, to look at finding candidates to recommend to the board, and then for the membership vote in November. The good news about that, if you're interested, this sounds like something you might be interested in, is because we changed the membership voted to change the bylaws last November, and we're cycling into 2-year board terms. That means the whole board will not be up for election like it has been historically. Only I think we have 4 or 5 positions are the only ones that will be up for voting. So again, if you'd like to try a director position, or secretary, treasurer are the 2 officer positions that we'll be voting on candidates for. So give it some thought. Let me know if you're interested, or you can call Andrea Foss, our board vice president. And then lastly, I know Mark is going to officially introduce Dave Titterington, but I'd like to give Dave and Linda, on behalf of the board, I'd like to express our organization gratitude and appreciation for you two, for all the financial, technical support that you've given us through the years, and in some cases, even emotional support when we've needed it. So thank you, Dave and Linda.
Thank you, Teresa, and I also want to mention that our major sponsor for the upcoming talk, which I'll talk about here in a little bit, the Doug Talmy event, is the Wild Bird Habitat. So we really appreciate that they're stepping up and they're their major sponsor for that event. There are a few flyers on the table out there about the 50th anniversary lunch with Doug Talmy talk that will occur December 3rd at the Innovation Campus at the old fairgrounds. Registration will be online in early October, probably late that first week or that second week. You'll be able to go online and register and either get the meal tickets, which will be $40, or you can come just to the talk, and that's free, or you can come to both. But tickets are required for both, and you can go online, register. If you can't get registration, you can call into the office and talk to Arliss and I, and we can take your information and get you registered with a credit card, or if you want to stop by the office with a check. If you're going to go to the lunch, if you just want tickets to the event, there's no charge for that. On Saturday, August 26th, which is coming up at 7:30, Tim Houghton is going to lead a birding trip to Marsh Wren. They'll meet at the parking lot at 7:30. You can call the office if you have any questions. Last month we went out to Marsh Wren, saw a lot of shorebirds and some other birds there. And so Tim's going to try it again this month. So that again is August 26th, a Saturday at 7:30, bright and early out there. We're planning to have a second seed collection this Saturday, the 12th, coming up at the Wildcat Prairie from 9 to noon. If it rains, the event might get moved to Deacon. I'll check with Ross. Ross, how's that road looking? Okay, so you haven't heard for sure. So if you're thinking about going down there on this Saturday, why don't you call the office tomorrow, or we'll get you in touch with Ross. Ross is going to check that, find out if the road's looking pretty good from the last rains. But if it rains heavy tonight, which we're going to get a little rain in Lincoln, I don't know if they're going to get it down there, but that is a minimum maintenance road, that last little tail of it. So if it gets muddy or not really passable for folks, we'll move it up here to Deacon Prairie by Unadilla. But otherwise, we'll be down there at the Wildcat Ernie Rusick Prairie. So that'll be from 9 to noon on the 12th. So keep an eye on the weather, and we'll try to keep people updated if you're interested in doing seed collection. I want to thank everyone that attended or volunteered to help with the Tour of the Wild Side event 2 weeks ago. We had just under 200 visitations at 7 different sites. I think if it wasn't raining buckets that morning, we probably would have doubled the attendance. We ended up, the first the morning hours from 10 to 2 or 10 to noon, we didn't have many people, but then from noon to 2, it really picked up. So if we would have had a full day, I think we would have had a really good crowd. But I'm still happy with the 196, 97 people that we had attend, the attendees. I also want to thank Tim Knott, Ann DeFries, John Oberg, and Pat Leash. I see Pat's in the audience tonight. They came out and helped cut trees at Arnold Elementary. We cut trees out there a few weeks back on Northwest 48th. The heat index that night was right at 100. So it was a warm one. About 7:30 it started to get nice though, but we started at 6 and it was a beastly at that time. But thank you again to those folks. We might have one cut later this fall, but it'll definitely be cooler. But we got a lot of trees taken out, cedars as well as some hardwoods, so that prairie's looking really good. I'm going to take a couple minutes now and see if there are any unusual bird sightings recently. We always checked. Does anybody have any unusual bird sightings in or around Lincoln? Doesn't look like we have any volunteers. Linda, do you have, or you've got the mic? You're gonna.
Is it on?
Yep, it's on now.
I'm going to tell you about something that's been going on in my yard.
Okay.
Today I looked out at my feeders and I put out a bunch of peanuts that I got over at Backyard Habitat, and I had 12 brown-headed cowbirds on my feeder. And I mean, it was just quite amazing. As I backed out of my driveway, there were 19 brown-headed cowbirds in my neighbor's yard. It looks like they're almost all male. Like I saw one juvenile and one female. So how do cowbirds find each other? They lay their eggs in other birds' nests, and yet they still can get together. I don't know. I keep thinking about that tonight. Anybody else? And I bring you the... All right.
You got one up here, maybe, Linda, if you want to bring the mic up right here, the fourth row back in the middle.
Okay.
It's always fun to hear of different things that people spot around town.
This isn't an unusual bird, but this spring I had a ruby-throated hummingbird come to my feeder. It's been there the entire summer. It never left, which was strange. It's just that one little bird. It comes every single day,
Yep.
multiple times during the day. The other thing is I have a family of Cooper's hawks in the neighborhood, and there was must have been at least 3 young ones, because there was an adult with the 3 branching from branch to branch when they first exited the nest.
Nice.
Anybody else?
Okay, well, we'll go on with announcements. We also wanted to see if there was anyone interested in being our social director and being in charge of getting cookies each week. We've had a few people step up. We've got a couple of volunteers tonight to bring cookies, but it's always good if we've got someone kind of in charge of that and can get a hold of people and get people to bring cookies. You don't have to bring the cookies yourself, but just kind of organize it. But if we don't get a volunteer to help with that or cookies, we might have to end that special treats after our meeting. So if you're interested, get a hold of Arliss or I either tonight or any time, but we'd love to get a new social director that's in charge of that, coordinating that work, or at least volunteers set up to bring cookies the next couple of months. If you just have to volunteer once to bring in a couple dozen cookies, that would be great. A reminder, tonight's presentation will be available on YouTube, so you can catch tonight's. And a couple of people told me they were going to miss tonight's, but they're going to watch the replay of it because they had other conflicts tonight. So that's good to hear that people are watching that. We're not going to have the wetland film after tonight's presentation like we have several meetings. So the last one will be next month. It'll be the final of a 5-part series on wetlands. So next month, if you come, we'll probably be showing that last of the 5 series with Dakota and Ethan probably helping with that. Tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, is Dave Tennington. He's a longtime Wachiska member, a past board member, and a very generous supporter, as was mentioned earlier by Teresa, the many things he's done for us, including the major supporter of the Doug Talmy and our 50th anniversary party coming up. Dave and his wife Linda have been wonderful to Wachiska over the years, and tonight we will have that drawing after the presentation. So if you didn't get your ticket, be sure and get it afterwards. We'll wait a couple minutes after we go ahead and sign off. We'll have that drawing, and then we also have the 2 Bluebird boxes by Lyle Veneer that he brought in. So tonight, Dave is going to talk about popular feeders and the feeds recommended for each. And Dave, thanks for joining us tonight, and he'll take questions after the presentation, or do you want them during? What's your preference?
Afterwards
After?
would work better.
Okay, that way you can get through his thoughts, and then at the end, people can ask questions. So with that, Dave, take it away.
All right, well, thank you, and I'm glad to be here. I'm Dave from Wild Bird Habitat Stores. October 1st, we'll be going on our 30th year. And to answer some of the questions like Linda had posed, and the hummingbird, that was another one. I have a sister that had a hummingbird all summer long. I think they're just first year or second year subadults that just didn't make it north. I don't think they're nesting around here. They do nest along the Missouri River, but I don't think we're going to find them nesting around Lincoln. But to Linda's report on the cowbirds and in a group, this is kind of a time of year where I could have talked about summer bird feeding, I could have talked about winter bird feeding, but birds are in transition right now. They're just starting to enter that transitional period. You're probably already seeing some birds flock together. We're seeing martins flock together. Won't be long, the swifts, chimney swifts will be flocking together. And so because it's a transitional period, I thought I'd do a little different presentation to kind of go along with that transitional period where you're not quite through feeding for summer, but you're not quite ready for winter feeding. So what we're going to talk about is the 7 basic bird feeders for attracting the majority of species to your backyard, and some of the bird feed that goes with it. So if I can, gotta point it this way. Help me out, Linda. Got it? There we go. So I'm sure that if you feed birds, or if you're thinking about feeding birds and you walk into a store like Wild Bird Habitat, which these pictures are, or you might be walking into Ace Hardware, you might be walking into Menards. When you walk in there, you're gonna see just this vast assortment of feeders. And if you're thinking, well, I wanna get a feeder to attract cardinals, or I wanna get a feeder to attract goldfinch, or chickadees, and you sit there and you look at these, you kind of wonder, well, what feeder is it that I need? And it can be pretty overwhelming. At our business, it's not too bad because we have employees that'll help you out as far as selecting a feeder and meeting your needs and the needs of the birds in your backyard. But if you go into Ace Hardware, big box store, Menards, you're probably not going to have anybody that's going to be able to answer your questions. And so I just wanted to give kind of a brief overview tonight on the different types of feeders to attract different types of birds, and along with that, the types of feed that go along paired up with those feeders. Now we all know what the specialty bird feeders are. We've got the hummingbird feeder, oriole feeder, and mealworm feeders. Those are kind of specialty. They're not the kind of feeders that fit in with the seed type feeders. Hummingbirds, now's the time to get your hummingbird feeders out. They'll be moving through. The orioles, the females are getting ready to leave. The male will stick around till about the middle of September with the juveniles. So if you're feeding orioles, you still have plenty of time to keep the jelly out and the oranges out for them. And bluebirds anymore with the warming climate, we have a lot of bluebirds that are wintering over in Nebraska. So putting out mealworms and feeding them throughout the winter months, we have a lot of people that do that. But it's what we're gonna, talk about tonight is the 7 basic bird feeders and some of the basic seeds and a little bit about those seeds. So we're going to start out with the number 1 would be the hopper bird feeder. Now a hopper bird feeder, it's non-exclusive, meaning it doesn't detour any birds. All birds, large birds, small birds, all your favorite birds like the common grackle, they can all feed from it. From cardinals to jays to goldfish, chickadees, nuthatches. This is a non-exclusive feeder, so it's going to attract a huge variety of birds. The hopper feeder is determined by the fact that it has a reservoir that holds seed and it's gravity flowed out into a trough at the bottom. And that's the type of feeder, if you're going to attract cardinals, that you want to have. Cardinals like to face their food forward. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the feeders that they will go to and won't go to in a minute, but that's what a hopper feeder is. Has a reservoir, gravity flows out into a trough at the bottom. If you see this one right here, it's even got an additional seed catcher platform on it, which makes it also into a platform feeder, excellent one for cardinals. They're made out of a variety of materials from cedar to metal to post-consumer recycled plastics. The recommended feeds for hopper feeder, as well as any other elevated feeder, are black oil sunflower seed, safflower seed, the Nutri-Safflower, which is a really good one, or any nut-based type mix. You want to avoid, and this is your choice, but I recommend you avoid the general wild bird mixes, the Proso millet-based mixes, because the birds that come to elevated feeders are after the nut meats, and is what they're going to do. They're going to sit on that edge of that feeder and they're going to sweep through it, picking out all the nut meats, because those are the ones that are high in fat content, and birds can tell that they contain high fat, and those are the ones they're going to go after. So all the other product in there, if there's a little bit of cracked corn, white Proso millet is going to end up on the ground, I guarantee you, because they're going to sweep through it to get the feed they want. So like I say, black oil, safflowers, or any of the nut-based mixes, it's a great starter feeder or a great backyard bird feeder for attracting a big variety of birds, because like I said, it's a non-exclusive feeder, but they come in such a variety. You walk into a store with birding products and you're sitting there looking, all you got to remember is if it's got a reservoir to hold seed in it and a trough at the bottom where gravity flows out, those are hopper type feeders. They come in a variety, decorative, they come in recycled, post-consumer recycled plastic, cedar. This one right up here is a squirrel-proof feeder made out of metal, but there again, it'd classify as a hopper feeder. It's got a reservoir right here where the seed flows out down here through this trough. If a squirrel gets on there, it closes so he can't get it. But this one here is probably one of the first feeders I bought. I was trying to think of the garden center out in North Lincoln where I started buying my first bird feeders and bird feed. Pretty inexpensive plastic not real durable, probably won't last. But most of these feeders, even this window feeder right here, you could classify that as a hopper feeder. Right there in the middle is the reservoir that you fill up with seed, and it gravity flows out to the side. These are the types of feeders that you're going to attract cardinals to. Like I said, you're going to attract large birds, small birds, because there's a good perching area, and the gravity flow, that seed's going to flow out to the bottom. The advantage for us is you're not running out filling it all the time. Some of these can hold up to a half gallon, even a gallon of wild bird feed, so that can last quite a while. The next feeder is the seed tube feeder. Now we're getting a little bit more specific here. These here are more of an exclusive feeder, primarily for smaller birds like chickadees, goldfinch, nuthatches, clinging birds like woodpeckers. The only thing is, birds learn by associated behavior. So if you've got this grackle sitting on your fence over there, and you've got this tube feeder, seed tube feeder, that you're expecting small birds to be at, he's going to look at that and says, well, if they can do it, I can do it. And he's going to go over there and give everything, every bit of effort to try to cling on that and feed from it, but it's pretty difficult for him, especially with the peg perches. They're made from a couple of different products, PVC, which is really durable, polycarbonate tubing, that's extremely durable. It's UV stabilized. It won't get brittle during the winter months. Another nice thing about it is the manufacturers such as Duncraft, Aspects, Droll Yankee, that use the polycarbonate feeders, they provide a lifetime warranty on them, and that even includes squirrel damage. So if you get a squirrel that goes up there and chews a hole in that feeder, you bring it into our store, we'll repair it at no cost. You get really irritated at a squirrel and you throw the feeder at it and break it, bring it in, we'll fix it. There again, it's an elevated feeder, so you want to go with nut meats. You want to go with black oil sunflower seed, Nutrisaf or white safflower seed, or some of the nut-based mixes that we carry at the store. You want to stay away from acrylic tubes. You might go out, you might get a really good deal on a inexpensive feeder at one of the big box stores. Might only cost you $14, $15, but I guarantee you that acrylic is not UV stabilized. It's going to yellow, it's going to get brittle, it's just going to deteriorate in the hot sun. During the winter months when it gets cold, there again it gets brittle. If it falls, if it drops, it's going to crack. You can almost be sure of that. And if you want to continue feeding birds, you're going to have to go out and buy another $15, $16 feeder. You come to Wild Bird Habitat, the feeders may cost a little bit more, but think of it as an investment. And if anything happens to it, you bring it in, we'll repair it, whether it's under warranty or not. Like I say, a lot of the feeders we carry, I'd say about 80% of them are made in the US. We can get parts for all these feeders and we can repair them right on site at our store. But there again, an elevated, right here is Nutrisaf, and this little chickadee just loves that Nutrisaf. But there again, elevated feeders, I'd avoid general wild bird mixes, because those birds, when they come to those elevated feeders, such as the chickadees, even the goldfinch, the nuthatches, they want those nut meats because it's high in fat. We'll talk about that in a minute. This is another good starter feeder. They come in a variety of designs and specialties, and one of the main seed tube feeders with a single perches on it. Why that rose-breasted grosbeak sits on that and the cardinal can't, I have no idea. This here is a squirrel-proof feeder, seed tube feeder. It's got the ports, and that's how you can tell if it's a seed tube feeder. It's going to be a feeder with all these ports that go up and down the tube. On here, it's squirrel-proof. If a squirrel gets on here, it closes. The reason you're seeing that cardinal sit on there, if you notice that perch right there, it's a U-shaped perch. They designed that specifically to allow cardinals to sit on it. Droll Yankee's gone to the same on their tube feeders to have these horseshoe type perches that will allow cardinals to readily sit on there. It might take them a while before they figure out that, oh, I can sit here, but they will. It might be a seed tube in a cage to deter squirrels, to deter your favorite common grackles, or even starlings coming up to the feeder. Unfortunately, this also will deter cardinals. They can't get through there, but I tell you, we're going to get into the peanut feeders, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But I've got one like this that's a peanut feeder. Downy woodpeckers have no trouble getting in there. And I'll tell you how the larger woodpeckers get their seed. They might be a decorative feeder, but there again, it's a seed tube. They've got these ports that go up and down the tube, whether it's metal, whether it's acrylic like this one, whether it's polycarbonate like this one. And the reason I have this one on here, even though it's identical to here, is if you have a seed tube feeder with single perches on it and you do want to attract cardinals, you're going to have to put a seed tray on the bottom, because that's the only way that cardinal is going to come up to that seed tube and feed. He's not going to sit on those peg perches. Oh. Thistle feeders. This is one that's really popular. We have some people that's the only feeder that they ever put out during the winter months, even though if you live out in rural areas, you'll have goldfinch throughout the summer months until a lot of the natural foods become plentiful. If you live in town, by the middle of June, you're going to find that all your finches have left. Is what they did. They go out into rural areas, out in the countryside where they nest. But this is a really specialized type feeder because it takes a specialized type seed, Niger thistle seed. Niger thistle seed is an imported seed from India, Ethiopia, Nigeria. It attracts goldfinch, housefinch, pine siskins, other finch-like birds during the winter. You might have common redpolls on it. You'd be surprised the birds that'll come in and feed on Niger thistle seed. Niger thistle seed is basically like black oil to us. The majority of premium grade black oil in the U.S. is crushed for sunflower oil for human consumption. In the countries where Niger thistle seed comes from, they do the same thing. They crush it for cooking oil. It's a really heavily oiled seed, and that's why the finches like it so much. It comes in a variety of products, PVC, the polycarbonate tubes, just like the seed tube feeders. Again, I'd avoid the acrylic because there again, it's not very durable. You might get a year, maybe 2 years out of it, but I guarantee you it's going to yellow, it's going to get brittle, it's going to crack in the winter, and it's not going to last long. And these you want to fill with Niger thistle seed. You want to make sure it's fresh. Thistle seed's got a shelf life of about 6 months when it's imported. It's heat treated by the USDA to prevent noxious weeds from slipping into North America. We got plenty of those already. So it's heat treated. It will not germinate, but that heat treatment starts the drying out process of the oils. Once it gets to a certain point, usually after about 6 months, the oils in it are so dry that the goldfinch will just ignore it. So even if you go to a store and it happens all the time, people say, hey, I just bought this bag 2 weeks ago from the store down the street here, but where's the goldfinch? Well, I guarantee you it's probably been warehoused for an extended period of time, and it's probably the oils have probably dried out in it. If you want to use a finch mix, we developed our own finch mix, which is 50% Niger, 50% ground sunflower. That's giving the goldfinch the best of both worlds. If you want to be careful about and avoid at all possibilities commercial pre-bagged finch mixes, because there's a lot of seed in there that the finch won't eat. Some of the Niger, they don't even use Niger, they use flax. It looks a little bit like Niger, but that's one way that they can economically sell it. Plus, one of the really bad things is a lot of it contains canary reed grass, which is extremely invasive. If you live around a wet area, you don't want to get it started because you'll spend years trying to get rid of it. So that's the number 3 is a thistle bird feeder. That can be a tongue twister. Oop, let me go back there. Up, we did that one. So seed tube, oh, I'm going the wrong way here. Here we go. Because these thistle feeders, they come in a variety of styles as well. So you go into a store, you're looking for a thistle feeder, you see all these different types. There's the polycarbonate tube with the perch on it. Here's a squirrel-proof Niger thistle feeder But really, I don't see a reason to have a squirrel-proof Niger thistle feeder unless you're feeding a finch mix that has the ground sunflower chips in it, which that will get a squirrel's attention in a hurry. It might just be a simple sock, which are really popular. Goldfinch love them. Nice thing about that, if it rains, you can just shake it around, loosen it up, it'll air dry back out. This is an upside down thistle feeder. I don't know if you've ever seen one. It was developed back east. I think it was Duncraft that came out with this. The reason for the upside down thistle feeder is to deter house finch. We don't have the time to get into why we have house finch here. They're not endemic to the central Great Plains. It's a western bird species, but their population got so populous, I guess you could say, back east where they were released after they were taken back east to sell as an exotic bird, and Fish and Wildlife found out they're federally protected. So they created this huge house finch population that were chasing goldfinch away from thistle feeders. So that's where they came up with the upside down thistle feeder. Goldfinch can hang upside down and feed. The ports are underneath those perches, but the house finch can't. There's mesh feeders like these right here. Those are really popular. There again, it's nice because if it get into rain or anything, because of all that mesh, it'll dry back out. Cedar feeders, I don't recommend wooden thistle feeders for Niger seed because that wood starts to absorb that oil and it just makes that seed dry out even faster. But there again, you might want a cage feeder, especially if you're using a finch mix. So Niger thistle bird feeders come in a variety of styles and shapes, decorative. I mean, it can be kind of overwhelming when you walk in and see all the different types, but if you just look and see that it's for the small Niger seed, really tiny holes, even in the mesh, even in the sock, that's for feeding Niger thistle. Yep, there I go again. Oop. Okay, platform feeders. This is probably one of my favorite. Platform feeders, they're non-exclusive. All birds can feed from it, and it's probably one of the favorite for most backyard birds. They can be hung or post-mounted. You can use with a variety of seeds. This is one where if you want to use a general wild bird mix, works great because they're not going to come in there and sweep through it and knock it out of the feeder. They can get in there and they can pick out those nut meats that they want. It comes in, you can post-mount them. Like I said, you can hang them. Some have roofs on them to kind of help protect it from the rain and snow. This one here is made from polycarbonate, so really durable, lifetime guarantee. Might be decorative. It might be one that you just cling to your window. It's got this trough where that basically acts as the same as a platform feeder. Might be whimsical, like a little chair here, or made out of steel. So there's a lot of different ways for platform feeders that you'll see. It's just basically a tray. And they can come in a variety of different styles, designs, materials. So that's one way to identify if it's a platform feeder. That's a feeder that besides the nuts, the general wild bird mix, if you want to put any fruits on there, raisins, that works great. Mealworms, if you put mealworms on there, you might want to put them in a little can or something glass because they'll climb out of that wood. But in some of these feeders that have metal sides or plastic sides, they won't be able to get out of those. Ground feeders, when I started this business 30 years ago, they weren't even on the radar. My first ground feeder was an old window screen propped up on bricks. It worked great. And I had a garage full of old storm windows and screens that I had a endless supply of ground feeders, but they usually weren't very durable. And they did finally come out with ground feeders that have screen bottoms. They target ground foraging birds, juncos, doves, a lot of our native sparrows that we get migrating through, from chipping sparrows in the summer to white-throated and white-crowned sparrows in the winter. They feed strictly on the ground. And so that's where ground feeders come in. They have screen bottoms on them so that if it rains, moisture goes through, seed dries back out. They're a pretty popular feeder. They could be made out of cedar, recycled plastic. They could be made out of metal. The nice thing is it keeps that seed off the ground for the most part, so you don't have a lot of moldy, spoiling seed on the ground that can be detrimental to the birds. If you do put it on the ground and you've got a lot of squirrels, you might want to think twice about putting black oil sunflower seed in it, because then it's going to become a squirrel feeder. So what you want to do is use one of the safflowers, either the white safflower, the Nutrisaf. I'm not going to tell you that that's 100% squirrel proof. I'll say it's 99% squirrel proof. You're always going to have that one squirrel that's going to do everything he can to outsmart you, and he might just eat that safflower seed just to irritate you. I don't know why they do. Most squirrels leave it alone. I don't know how many times I've had platform feeders hanging in a tree with safflower in it. No problem with squirrels whatsoever. So ground feeders, number 5, that's another one. There's not a huge selection of them out there. We've got quite a selection at Wild Bird Habitat. Some of them have removable screens, so it makes it really easy to clean the shells out once it's down to shells. It's a nice feeder to put underneath on the ground, underneath a tube feeder. Birds aren't the neatest of eaters. They'll pull out 3 seeds, drop 2, eat 1. Well, if you got a ground feeder sitting under it, those seeds they drop go on the ground feeder, and then they're actually replenishing that ground feeder for you. So ground feeders are actually a pretty important part of backyard bird feeding, and one of the 7 basic backyard bird feeders. Suet feeders, and I love this picture here. We've got a hairy woodpecker, we got a downy woodpecker. You can really tell the difference just by looking at that beak. The beak of a hairy woodpecker is as long or just a little bit longer than his skull, whereas on a downy, it's half the length of its skull. Next to each other, it's pretty easy to tell them apart. When they're solo, you see one at a time, you might have to think about it. And these are both females because they don't have that red patch. But that's one easy way to tell if it's a hairy or a downy, is with that, the size of that beak. Suet feeders for birds of the tree trunk zone, such as woodpeckers, nuthatches, brown creepers, chickadees, even Carolina wrens, which we have a pretty good population anymore that does winter over. If you're having trouble with starlings, I'll show you in the next slide how to deal with that. But if you can use just a pure suet, is what the starlings and the squirrels are attracted to, are the different nut products or seed products that are mixed in with that suet. And that's what brings them to it. If it's just a pure piece of suet, which is rendered beef fat, there's not much there for a starling or a squirrel, and they'll pretty much leave it alone. A lot of people think feeding suet is just a wintertime food. Woodpeckers and other birds will eat more suet between March and the end of summer than all winter long. Plus, during the nesting season, you'll see both the male and the female coming. During the winter months, the female doesn't really tolerate the male very much, so you really won't see. In fact, you'll probably see her chasing him away from the suet feeder. But there again, it's a year-round source of food, high-energy food that woodpeckers need, especially during the nesting season. We're going to look at some upside-down suet feeders, cage suet feeders to help deter starlings, and we'll do that right here. There's suet logs. It might be vertical, it might be horizontal. This horizontal, there's the hairy, there's the downy. This horizontal feeder with the downy on it is an upside down feeder. Makes it rather difficult for unwanted birds to get to. You will get starlings that'll fly up and flutter underneath and hit it with their beak and knock little pieces of the ground and then go down and feed on it. But if it wasn't upside down, those starlings would just sit there and consume it until it's gone. So that's the advantage of upside down suet feeders. Here's one that's made out of post-consumer recycled plastic. This is just a typical suet cage that are available almost anywhere. You can turn that into an upside down feeder. Just hang it, leave the plastic, hard plastic shell on the suet, leave the suet only exposed underneath on the bottom. You've got a pretty inexpensive upside down suet feeder. We even have this starling stumper right here that's stumping this starling, that you can take a typical inexpensive cage suet feeder and put this hanger on it, and it'll hang it upside down for you. There's also cage suet feeders that's going to deter squirrels, going to deter starlings from coming to starlings. They're pretty big on suet, so you want to try some way if you've got starlings coming to try to deter them. There's even squirrel-proof suet feeders. There again, this is designed from Brome Bird Care. If a squirrel gets on this, it slides down, closes off the suet so the squirrel can't get it. This comes with a pretty good warranty on it. Anything happened to it, we'll cover it at the store. Tail prop suet feeders. The reason for that tail prop right there is that woodpecker can use that tail, stiffen it, and use it for leverage. When he's drilling, when a woodpecker's drilling on that suet, or when he's drilling on the side of your house, or when he's drilling to announce his territory, he's hitting at about 12 mile an hour. If you can imagine what that'd feel like walking into a wall at 12 mile an hour. So that tail prop really helps them stabilize that tail so they can really get active with that bill. They might come in decorative. There's decorative suet feeders. There's even suet feeders that have suet balls. That you buy a suet feeder for suet balls, you drop the balls in it. They work real well. There's even suet nugget feeders that you put suet nuggets in. Some of these nuggets come with mealworms in them. So that's another popular one. Or it might just be some whimsical feeder that you put the suet cake in. But so suet feeders come in a variety of different styles. Squirrel proof, upside down, caged. So there again, if you're looking to create a complete backyard bird feeding program, suet feeders is one that I'd also recommend. Peanut bird feeders, this is probably my favorite. No, I already said my favorite was a platform. So I don't know if this is my first favorite or my second favorite, but I'm going to show you some pictures that'll blow you away. But feeding peanuts, shelled peanuts, we sell an unbelievable amount. We've got a lot of people that have found out how exciting it is to feed not just shelled peanuts, but peanuts in shell. You can put them on a platform feeder like this male red belly right here. You can see this immature male northern flicker right here, probably not a northern, probably a yellow shafted flicker. He hadn't got his adult plumage yet, but he can reach in there, and you wonder how he can get to the seed in there. Well, if you look at this right here, this male red belly, you can see that tongue. That tongue reaches out about 6-7 inches. So even on a cage feeder, they can use that tongue that's barbed and sticky on the end and reach in and get out peanut pieces. Right here, we've got a male or a female downy feeding one of the juveniles. Platform feeders, robins. What's a robin doing on a peanut feeder? In the spring when robins come back, they'll readily feed on shelled peanuts. It's just like a big berry to them. And you'll have a red belly right here that is a little bit irritated at that jay and robin on his feeder. There again, cage feeder. Downy woodpeckers have no trouble getting through that wire, and it's a great way to feed peanuts without having to deal with squirrels or starlings. Peanuts is another feed starlings really go for, unfortunately. But on a platform feeder with peanuts in shell on it, cardinals, it's fun to watch a cardinal because where the blue jay will take a peanut is what the blue jay will do. It's really entertaining to watch. A blue jay will take a peanut, he'll pick it up, drop it, he'll grab another one, pick it up, drop it, and he'll do that 2 or 3 times. And it's what he's doing, he's testing for weight. He wants to take the shell, the peanut in the shell that's got the most weight because it's got the most peanut in it. And ironically, I've even seen him bring peanuts back and exchange them for other peanuts. So, but the jay, he'll take the peanuts and fly off to a branch, put it between his toes and hammer it open with his beak. A lot of them they cache away. That's where the blue jay gets the nickname, the harvester bird. They're responsible for planting a lot of trees because of all the nuts, tree nuts that they cache away. And surprisingly enough, they remember where every one of those nuts is. They've even tried rearranging areas to try to confuse the jay. Can't confuse them. They know where that's a member of the Corvidae family, probably one of the smarter bird families there are, although all birds are smart. If anybody calls you a bird brain, take it as a compliment. Cardinals, it's pretty cool to watch a cardinal feed on. They'll go after the shelled peanuts, but peanuts in a shell, when the cardinal gets it, he'll take that grosbeak, he'll just crush it open. He doesn't hammer it open or nothing. He'll just crush it open. But the peanut feeders, I tell you, this is pretty wild. You might think this is one of my favorite peanut feeders because I've got this yellow-shafted flicker. I got a yellow-bellied sapsucker picture of one. I've got a hairy on there. I've got a chickadee on there. I've got a red-breasted nuthatch. I've had white-breasted nuthatch. I tell you, you cannot believe the variety of birds. Why? Because it's high in fat content, between 40 and 48% fat. That's what those birds want because that's where they derive their energy from, and that's where they derive the ability to stay warm in Nebraska on cold winter nights. So they come in a variety from platforms. Here's a female red belly that they get pretty irritated at those jays. The jays are fun to watch because you can see their whole hierarchy from the most dominant jay right down to the subordinate jay. I tell you, attracting jays, they did stomach content research on jays. 500 jays, they found less than 0.1% of any other bird body parts in their stomach. A lot of people give them a bad rap. They're fun to have around. They're a great early warning device. If a cat, hawk, or other predator comes around, they'll let all the birds know. But so peanut feeders, they also have peanut feeders that you can use for peanuts in the shell. They come in caged right here during the winter. There's two Carolina wrens in this feeder right here. Like I say, they stay around a lot more. There's mesh peanut feeders. So peanut feeders come in a variety of different styles, shapes. This is a squirrel-proof peanut feeder. There again, if a squirrel gets on here, it'll close, shut that feeding area off so the squirrel can't get at the peanuts. There again, most of these have lifetime warranties on them. These here, you don't need a warranty on those. You could drive your car over those and you probably wouldn't do any damage to it. It's a pretty heavy-duty steel feeder. So those are the types of feeders that you want to have, those 7 types of feeders: the hopper feeder, seed tube feeder, thistle feeder. Then you want to have a platform feeder, suet feeder, peanut feeder, and I left one out. Does anybody know which one that was? Please? So anyway, that's where the bigger variety, these birds, all these birds have certain feeding characteristics. Whether it's elevated, whether it's on the ground, whether it's on a perch, whether it's on a platform. So the more variety of feeders you have, the styles, the bigger selection, the more species that you're going to attract to your backyard. We're going to touch real quick on wild bird feed, what a bird wants. A bird wants what we don't, and that is high in fat content. The higher the fat, the better they love it, because that's where they generate the energy they need during the nesting season, during migration. That's where they generate the fat for staying warm during the winter. When it's really cold, you figure a bird, most mammals, they got a den, a burrow, someplace to go. Birds, they're just right out there in the open. The protein in wild bird feed is only for feather production, builds bone, aids in egg laying, helps the bird's immune system. It's the fat that provides the energy for migration, keep them warm in the winter, and provides them energy during the nesting season, which requires an awful lot of energy on a bird's part. So when you look at the types of feeds that you get in a bag of feed, the sunflower, the safflowers, the Niger, peanuts, or the mixed nuts, they range between about 25 up to about 25% protein, but up to about 40% fat. That's why I don't recommend putting that general wild bird mix in a hopper feeder because they're after the fat, and that's the nut meats. So they're going to sweep through there. So in those feeders, you might start out and do a lot better, get a lot better activity if you just go with a single type of nut, such as black oil sunflower seed, sunflower hearts, or the safflower seed, or some of the specialty wild bird nut mixes. White proso millet, a preferred seed for a lot of birds. It's not really high in fat, as you can see right here, only 4%, but it does contain a lot of other mineral sources and vitamins that birds need, and that's why white proso millet is one of the preferred seed by most all birds. But when you look at a bag of wild bird feed and you see all those little tiny white seeds in there, doesn't mean it's white proso millet. It might be a different kind of millet. It might be a cereal grain. It might be a weed seed. As long as it's not declared a noxious weed by the state of Nebraska, they can put it in a bag of bird seed. Doesn't mean birds eat it. And that's what you get into when you get these economy mixes. You go to most people, they buy a bird feeder and they look and they go, oh, there's a bag of bird feed. It's got beautiful pictures of cardinals and chickadees on it, and it's got a great name like Audubon's Songbird Garden, and you go, that's got to be the seed I need. Well, is what's going to happen. It's full of milo, wheat, barley, red millet, canary reed grass. Please stay away from any seed product. Canary reed grass was introduced for exotic birds like budgies. But it's what these economy manufacturers found out that it's a lot cheaper than white proso millet. So that's why they're putting it in there. And there again, like I said, in the state of Ohio, it's the most invasive grass in the state of Ohio. You don't want to get it started. But when you look at these economy mixes and the protein they contain, 12% or less, look at the fat content, almost nothing. So that's why if you get, buy an inexpensive bag of general wild bird mix, and it all ends up on the ground, well, the cost of that bag just went up from what you thought it was. And you've got, well, like I tell people, you're going to have to get a Kansas weed guide to figure out what's growing underneath your feeder, because you ought to see some of the things that'll come up. So if we get into the different types of seeds, black oil sunflower seed, that's probably a really prime seed for a lot of birds in a lot of elevated feeders. One thing you want to watch out for, the seed, the black oil we sell is all human grade. It's premium grade. Is what happens is a lot of the economy packagers where you'll see a 50-pound bag for $17.99, you go, wow, what a deal. Well, a lot of that is black oil that didn't make grade. It was either damaged by frost, by insect, by disease, and the majority of it goes into the livestock industry. It's ground up for livestock. But economy packagers have found out that they can buy that up really cheap and sell it off at a big box store at a premium price. But I tell you, those birds aren't stupid. In fact, if you really watch, it's not easy to see. You watch a cardinal when he comes up to feed on black oil, he'll just give it a quick shake. If there's nothing in there, he'll drop it. He's not even going to take the time to open it up. There again, Niger seed, you want to make sure that it's fresh. If you're using a Finch mix, I'd really recommend sticking with ground fine sunflower and Niger thistle. There again, in the commercial Finch mixes, there's a lot of seed in there that the Finch don't like. What happens is if you get an economy bag of seed, you get black oil that didn't make grade and should be fed to livestock, but the economy baggers get it and they sell it to people that are feeding birds. What happens is these birds come up and they figure it out pretty quick that, well, there's really nothing here for us. And so if you put that out there and you're not seeing birds, eventually you're probably going to get disappointed. You're probably not going to fill the feeder. The feeder's going to end up in the garage, and the bird's going to go someplace else to eat. So there again, it makes sense. You might spend a little bit more for a quality wild bird mix or a nut-based mix or black oil, but you're going to have way less waste. In fact, on general wild bird mixes that contain a lot of filler seed, as much as 40% of that can be wasted down on the ground. Now, here's one thing you want to know is all seed has to be labeled by law. And so instead of looking at that pretty picture on the front of the bag, turn around and read what's in there on the back of the bag, because that'll tell everything. It'll tell what the fat content is, what the protein content is, fiber, they use fiber for digestion, there'll be moisture, that moisture aids in digestion, but you want to check what the fat content is on that bag of seed you're buying. Plus, all seed has to be labeled in order of content, just like our food is, just like pet food is, labeled in order of content from the greatest to the least. And if it has, we've got, no, we're not going to questions yet. Oh, well, you can still see it. We'll go this route because we're about done. We've got seed that's got fruit in it. If you buy a bag of seed and it says fruit, it better say on that label what fruit is in there. It can't just say fruit. If it's got tree nuts in it, it's got to list each one of those tree nuts that's in there. So like I said, don't look at the pretty package on the front of a bag. Turn around and read the label, and that'll tell you. And the better quality of feed with the products in it that the birds are going to feed on, you're going to get more activity. You're going to get more species of birds. It's probably going to save you money in the long run, and it's going to keep your ground under the feeder a lot more. Are you working on that, Linda? Well, we'll just try to go to the next. Oh. Well, right over here in that little frame, we've got white Nutrisaf or white safflower and Nutrisaf. Nutrisaf, a lot of people call it safflower gold. They might call it brown safflower. The nice thing about the safflowers, it slows down grackles from coming to your feeder. It's not going to eliminate them, but they're not going to come to your feeder and spend the day there. They'll come up, pick through it, and leave. Squirrels, like I said, I'd say squirrels leave it alone, but from people that have commented to me, I'm just going to leave it at 99% of the squirrels leave it alone. So safflower seed, especially the Nutrisaf, I've had everything from cardinals. Our Niger sales have really gone down because the goldfinch readily go for Nutrisaf. It's a really thin hull. The nice thing is Niger thistle seeds imported, Nutrisaf's grown by American farmers up in Idaho, Montana. So there we go. Now we can go to the next one maybe. Yeah, there's the Nutrisaf right there. And there's the traditional white. All this is they hybridize it organically so it doesn't have the hard white outer shell. You remove that hard white outer shell, it's got a thin hull. It increased the oil content by about 30%, which is probably why it's so desirable by such a huge variety of birds. I've had woodpeckers feed on it. I can't think of any bird that comes to backyard bird feeders that hasn't fed on Nutrisaf. It's a great product. But there again, I'm going to stick with 99% of the squirrels. Leave it alone, just so I don't get a phone call from any of you guys. How's that? All right, so we'll follow it up with any questions. You're getting a break tonight. Linda can tell you that usually when I do a presentation, we're just short of maybe, 2 hours? I didn't think you'd want to be here that long. So anyway, the 7 basic backyard bird feeders, we're not talking specialty feeders like hummingbird, oriole, and mealworm feeders. The 7 basic backyard bird feeders that you use wild bird feeds in, if you've got those 7 different types in your yard, you're going to be surprised at the larger variety and species of birds you're attracting. And if you use a quality wild bird feed, you'll really be surprised at the number of birds that keep coming back. And speaking of that, before I close or ask for questions, right now, we're in that transitional period. Right now is when you want to make sure you keep those feeders filled. One, we've got migratory birds, some that eat seed. They're going to be using your feeders to help fatten themselves up. And our resident birds, cardinals, jays, chickadees, white-breasted nuthatch. Right now, by the middle of August into September, they're going to be staking out food plots, both natural food plots, and if you keep your feeders filled, they'll put you on their list this winter because they move around to these different food plots throughout the day. They don't rely on any one food source because it might be covered in snow, it might get depleted. They've been around for millions of years. They know what they're doing. You're not going to spoil them. In fact, bird feeders only account for between 30 and 35% of a bird's diet when they're available. So they're not going to rely on your bird feeders. So a variety of different styles of bird feeders and quality wild bird feed. Remember, elevated feeders, nuts, single nuts, or nut-based mixes in elevated feeders. So does anybody have any questions, or did I answer everything?
Raise your hand, I'll give you the microphone so we can get the folks at home so they can hear the questions. So anybody have questions? Here we have one up here.
I would like to know why I don't have any chickadees anymore. January and February, I've always had them, but after January and February, I don't have them.
A chickadee, during the nesting season, a chickadee's territory is up to 20 acres per pair, and they aggressively defend that. So when you have this group, they'll form feeding flocks during the winter months, and you'll usually have downies with them. You'll have nuthatches with them.
Yeah.
But when the nesting season starts, they go off and identify their own territories. It might only be 10 acres, but chickadees need a large area.
They're like goldfinches. The
No,
gold- but the
chickadees will
goldfin-
nest in town. We've had them nest in a box in our backyard.
Oh, the goldfinch?
Yeah,
Well, the
no, the
goldfinches-
chickadees nest in a box.
Oh, really?
But chickadees back in right around 2000, their population crashed. And
Oh.
there was speculation it was caused by West Nile virus. Cornell Bird Lab, they had been tracking chickadees, and their population was at record numbers, and they knew it wasn't sustainable, and their population crashed. And Cornell Bird Lab, they weren't worried about it. They knew that that population would rebound. And so, yeah, you don't see the chickadees you might have seen 20 years ago, but they're out there, their population's coming back, and
Maybe
Yeah.
they'll come back to my yard.
oh, they'll come back during the winter, you'll see them.
Okay, thank you.
I've always had red belly woodpeckers in my yard, and now I don't, but I have flickers, the yellow shafted flickers.
Yellow shafted flickers.
Do they not get along, or? 'Cause
At the feeder, they don't.
well, no, I haven't seen a red belly come to the feeder in a long time.
Yeah, red bellies are probably one of the more common woodpeckers that we have, along with the downy. I don't know what the answer would be. It might be the type of seed that you're using.
I just use safflower, and
Yeah.
that's it.
You know, there you go. I tell you what, get a peanut feeder. Maybe you'll win that $80 gift card. Get yourself a peanut feeder. We were going to give away a feeder, but I thought, hey, after you see this and you win the $80 gift card, maybe there's a feeder you saw that I want to go get that feeder. And that's one thing about red bellies. The majority of the time, they're going to go for peanuts. Downies, the majority of the time, they're going to go for suet. I don't put a lot of suet out. I just feed peanuts, and I tell you, feeding peanuts, that'll brighten your whole day.
Question back here?
I have a weird question for you. I'm not sure you'll be prepared for.
Try me.
How do you get birds to land on you and use you as a feeder?
Well, one way that I know that people have done it is they'll put a glove out on a chair with seed on it and let the birds get acclimated to that glove, and then they'll go out and sit in that chair with the glove on and seed in it, and from there it's just how long they'll tolerate you. Hey, when it comes to red-breasted nuthatches, I've had people that have had them land on their glasses while they walk out to fill the feeder. Brooke, that used to work for us, at her graduation at UNL, she's got her cap and there's a red-breasted nuthatch sitting on it. And I think red-breasted nuthatch, because they really don't nest in our area. There's a population out in northwestern Nebraska, up around Shadron, that area up there, that red-breasted nuthatch do nest. Most of them that we get, they move back up north during the summer months, and they're in areas in the boreal forest or northern areas of Minnesota and play. They don't see a lot of human activity, so they haven't really developed a huge fear of us like most other birds have. And if you want a bird that's really scared of you, try the house sparrow. There's a bird that's so prosecuted, they just don't even like to be around humans, but I just wish we could send them all back. But yeah, so there you go. Did I answer it? Give that a try.
Here's a question.
No, I was going to add to that. So
You do that, Phil.
Black-capped chickadee. The black-capped chickadee you can feed on your hand. That's the most common. I've tried it in Nebraska. It doesn't work. But I grew up in Michigan, and it worked. And I use sunflower hearts. But you have to go out at the same time every day. And then you have to make like some sort of, signal for them. And like Dave said, birds will come to your feeders at certain times of the day if you watch when the chickadees come around. It's worth a try, but I haven't been able to do it here.
Birds are creatures of habit, and that's what Phil's talking about. They're creatures of habit.
So Dave, what's your spark bird?
My what?
Your spark bird. What got you interested in birding?
This story.
We
Well-
only have, I think, 40 minutes, so
Okay,
keep
well-
it short.
Okay, I was a single parent. I had 3 kids. My youngest daughter was in Brownies, Girl Scouts, and so, I was PTA president. I don't know how I got involved in all that, but I really, got involved in what my kids were doing, and I got involved with my daughter in Girl Scouts until they asked me to be the leader, and that's when I said, "Oh, wait a second here. Nah, I won't go that far." But so we went to the Girl Scout camp just south of Wabaunsee during the winter, and we made bird feeders out of pop bottles, recycled pop bottles. And I took it home, and I thought, I better hang this up or she's going to be disappointed. Had black oil in it. Hung it up in the backyard, and I'm sitting at the table, and I'm going, what's that bird? I've never seen that one before. That was back in 1985, 1986, and within 10 years, I had wild bird habitat open. Reason, because I wanted to feed birds year-round. Traditionally, it was a winter project. Nobody fed birds during the spring and summer months, especially spring when birds really could use the extra help. They've identified that through research that birds nest quicker and have more successful nestings if they have supplemental food available, because they're not spending all that time out foraging for depleted food after the winter months. So feeding in the spring is really important. But I wanted to feed birds throughout the summer months, but when summer came, the lawn and garden store, the hardware store, they put it all away. And even the garden centers, we don't carry seed during the summer, it just gets buggy. And I thought, well, I wanna. And I thought, well, I can't be the only one. When I went to open wild bird habitat, Jim King, I don't know if anybody knows him, he was on faculty at UNL with Ag Communications. He was my neighbor. He thought I was nuts. But it was Carl Wolf that that Carl, before I even thought of opening up the store, when I started opening the store, Carl told me that back in the 80s, just for his own benefit, he did a little bit of studying on how much birdseed was sold in the United States, and it was over 800 million tons annually. So Carl thought I was on a good track, nonetheless. But so To make it short, Girl Scouts.
Thank you for sharing.
Any other questions? Oh, we have one over here.
I can always have a dumb question. I have more squirrels and grackles than anything else, but I'm not feeding the birds. I put suet out, but I don't want to put it out because the grackles will sit there and eat it all. Although I like the way you hung it differently and left the plastic on top. I'm going to try that.
Yeah, and just leave it exposed on the bottom because it's what those grackles will do. Otherwise, without that plastic shell on there, they'll just sit on top and just sit there and feed
Yeah.
until it's gone.
Yeah, I have
And
a few
as for
that try.
squirrels, well, just depends on the weather. When it's really dry and trees don't produce a lot of fruit for birds, their population usually declines. It's when we have a lot of heavy rain, consistent rain, it stresses the trees and they want to just have fruits galore, and that's when the squirrel population will go back up. So,
Well, I've got 2 pin oaks, so we have a lot of
oh,
acorns.
so you're going to have a lot of squirrels at the pin oak.
Anyway, you talked about starlings, but grackles are the same pest, right? I mean, it's about
Grackles
the same.
are a federally protected bird. I'll agree, they can be a nuisance.
Yeah.
There's ways to control them. Safflower, cage feeders. Me, I got a platform feeder and hopper feeder year round. I put whole sunflower seed in, and I'll get grackles in there, but then they leave and other birds come in. One thing you can do is the more feeders you have, so it prevents overcrowding, it spreads it out a little more. I know people that have put a platform feeder on the back of their property and put cracked corn in it just to let the grackles have their day. The only thing I'm concerned about that is you might end up attracting more grackles in your yard than you want.
I don't even feed them, they just come.
Any other questions? Oh, back here we got one.
We just learned from a friend that she bought an electric water pistol to take care of the nuisance squirrels and the grackles and starlings. Can you answer that?
Well, I've seen people doing that, and they even have some automated motion type ones that they use for cats, but people that have used them for squirrels. And the thing is that, you know, a squirrel has from sun up to sundown to outsmart you. So you might have a water pistol and it might work for a while, but it just depends on, you know, how smart that squirrel is and how bad he wants that food.
Well, before that, Arliss had a comment or a question to talk a little bit about the importance of water for birds in the
Well, and that was
backyard.
one thing, like I said, I can keep you here for a long time, guys. Yeah, water during the winter months, birds can eat snow to get their hydration, but it'll lower their body temperatures, and then they're going to have to consume more food to build that body temperature back up so that they can make it through a cold night. If they have to go out during a cold winter and fly around looking for open water, which in Lincoln, there's usually open water somewhere. We've got a slough that runs all winter long. You got saline creeks. They can find water, but it expends a lot of energy if they're out flying around looking for that water. Birds know how much energy they can expend. That's why a lot of times during the winter, they can identify if they can conserve more energy, just sitting still, staying put, other than flying to a feeder or a water source. So water during the winter is extremely important for birds. And in fact, you can attract more birds to your yard in the winter with water, almost more than you can with wild bird feed. They got half a dozen or more different food plots already identified. Water can get pretty scarce when you get some of these cold temperatures in Nebraska. Then also, birds won't bathe under about 25 degrees, with the exception of starlings, which is really hilarious. They'll get in there when it's 18 degrees, get all wet, and then they're covered in ice and they can't fly, and they just kind of flop around on the ground. But when it's above 25, a lot of birds will bathe because that down under their primaries and secondary feathers, that acts as insulation. And it's just like, I compare it to long underwear. First day you put the long underwear on, you go out in the cold, it's not bad. But by the second or third day, if you do like me and wear them a few days, it starts to get matted, oily. It just doesn't keep you as warm. That's the same with bird feathers. That down's got to be kept clean in order to provide a good R value to insulate them on cold nights. During the summer, I tell you, it's really disheartening when you see songbirds in the gutter, because you know there's toxins in there, you know there's heavy metals in there. So provide them with fresh water during the spring and summer months is beneficial to them. One, you know they're getting clean water, and two, for hydration, and two, they can bathe and cool down when it gets hot.
Say, I was wondering about keeping your bird feeders clean. I know with the hummingbird feeders that I do, but the seed feeders, is there a suggested way of washing them out? And if so, how can one do this safely?
Well, what you want to use is just a weak solution of Clorox and water, and scrub it out, and then rinse it real well and let it dry. That's one thing about the feeders. A lot of the feeders we sell are easy to disassemble. It used to be we had feeders that you almost needed an engineer's degree to take them apart, and then you hope you can get them back together. But the ones that we carry, they're easy to disassemble, so they're easy to clean. That was one of the criteria set down by the wild bird feeding industry, to make them easy to fill, easy to clean. So just using a weak solution of Clorox and water is all you need to do. Then, like I say, rinse them out real well, and then let them air dry, preferably. Polycarbonate tubes, if you're going to dry those, you want to use a cloth. You don't want to use paper towel, because the cellulose in the paper towel will just start leaving these fine little scratches on it. So, but just Clorox and water, and then rinse real well. Same thing with bird baths. You can scrub your bird bath. If you've got a concrete bird bath, you can scrub it with a weak solution of Clorox and water. We do have toxic-free bird bath cleaners at our business, but if best way on a bird bath, if you want to keep it algae-free, keep it out of the sun. Sun promotes algae growth. If you put it in the shade, not so much that the birds can't find it, but if you keep it in a shady area, you're not going to have a problem with algae. But there again, and if you decide to leave that Clorox solution in there to let it soak in and kill the spores and the pores of the concrete, you want to cover it so birds can't get in there, and then rinse real well.
Okay, any other questions? Well, it looks like we're good for the night, Dave. We really appreciate it. We're going to have some snacks, some cookies afterwards. Remember, we're going to have the drawing after we sign off with the folks online. We'll do the drawing up front, and then we've got cookies and lemonade here. Thank you very much, Dave, for coming in tonight.
You bet. Thank you. Thanks for helping on that good one.
I'll let you go ahead and sign off the folks online.
Okay.